What do you call a wizard who's really bad at football?
What?
Fumbledore. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Brand Coverage. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson, and we are here. We have arrived. We are post week one. It's our first in-season edition of Brand Coverage. And I'll be honest, guys, week one could have gone a lot better for both Pat and I in terms of the fantasy realm. One redeeming quality, Pat, and I didn't really check into your Pat's pals, but Brand's boys did a great job week one. Problem is, I didn't draft any of them in our league, but they were all really good.
Yeah, Kyler was pretty good. Yeah, Kyler was good.
Kyler was pretty solid.
Metcalf was not
good. I knew that firsthand.
And Pacheco was good. So
yeah. I had Jaden Daniels was great. David Montgomery was great. Nico Collins was great. And Brock Bowers was one of the only tight ends that wasn't a complete fucking embarrassment week one. So, guys, for this episode of Brand Coverage, we're going to get into it. We're going to try to cover as much as humanly possible from week one, even though there is plenty to get through. But we're mainly going to focus on just the biggest studs of the week, the biggest duds of the week, our panic meter on some of the guys who underperformed in week one. We'll obviously go through the biggest injuries of week one as well, and then give you our priority waiver targets for the week. Because as we've mentioned on the show before, week one is typically the biggest waiver week because these are the guys that, you learn the most from week one. Yes, there are outliers, and yes, there's stuff that we'll look back on and be like, that doesn't matter. But week one is also your best chance to get ahead on guys that are going to be relevant all season long. So we'll get into some of that. But let's start with this primer, Pat. And I actually went back in our show last year because I felt like we said kind of the same thing last year, which was, it was a low-scoring week one. That was very much the case last year, more so than this year, actually. Last year in week one, we talked about the low total number of touchdowns scored. It was 61 total touchdowns in week one of 2023 after there had been 70 in week one of 2022 and then 88 in week one of 2021. This year, the total touchdowns were back up a little bit. They got back up to 71 from 61 last year, but the passing touchdowns continued to suffer. So the only reason we got back up to a normal touchdown total was because of the rushing touchdowns kind of anchoring that. This year, week one, only 35 passing touchdowns this week. That is down from 37 last year, 51 the year before, and 61 the year before that. So we are really tanking in terms of the passing touchdowns. So if you guys out there had a pocket passing quarterback or really any pass catcher that you felt underperformed for you week one, there's a reason for that. And it should normalize itself a little bit going forward, but just want to set that precedent. Don't panic just yet on any player you have that is involved in the passing game. Run game might be a little bit of a different story, but Pat, I put together Mount Studmore and Mount Rushmore just to kind of highlight the guys who were great week one and, maybe not so great week one. So 4 absolute studs and 4 absolute busts for week one. Let me pull up the stats for these guys. But number one for
you don't
Mount
have
Studmore,
a jingle for this or for
no jingle yet. Look,
no jingles, no mascots.
We got to get better producers.
This
here.
podcast is sponsored by NJM.
This podcast is sponsored by.
I've been coming. I'm going to continue to come. Skip's been coming. He's going to continue to come. I've been coming.
That's the sound effect I have available to us, so that's the one I'm going to use. I think that's reasonable. Mount Studmore, number one, Pat, was a guy who kicked off the season with the second game of the season, and that is Saquon Barkley. We actually clowned on the guy in our league who picked Saquon Barkley
severely.
5th overall, and he's looking like an absolute genius right now because Saquon kicked off the year with 24 carries for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns, along with 2 catches for 23 yards and another touchdown through the air. Half PPR point total, 32.2. This man fits this Philly offense like a glove, and if you've got him, you are feeling really good right now.
Yeah, I think the big concern was going to be, will he get the goal line carries with how successful a tush push was last year? And I think the answer, at least, yes, is yes at this point. Could that change? Of course. I wouldn't be surprised if that changes even this coming week, but he was on the field a lot. Only caught 2 passes. One of them was for a touchdown, but Yeah, I feel like the guy that I said was my least favorite pick of the first round is probably not going to be the worst guy in the first round.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. And look, it's the concerns we had with Saquon Barkley were at least largely quelled by week one. Because for me, my biggest concern, and it's going to sound silly in hindsight, but everything sounds silly in hindsight when you say a lesser player is going to be involved. But it was that Kenneth Gainwell was going to be more involved in the passing game, and he really wasn't that much of a factor. He was out there a little bit, but it wasn't nearly enough to make you worried about Saquon Barkley. Not like how Justice Hill was heavily involved in the Ravens game plan with Derrick Henry, but we'll talk about him maybe later. I mean, honestly, Derrick Henry, he was fine, but we'll see if we talk about him in depth. But as far as Saquon goes, like that was the one of the big concerns was that, you know, they still like Kenneth Gainwell, and they've always used Kenneth Gainwell on this team. There's a reason he's been an Eagle for so long, but also that, Pat, those goal line touchdowns, the bull case for Saquon Barkley as opposed to DeAndre Swift in this offense was if Saquon can just get in the end zone from a little further out, where some of those runs that Swift simply couldn't finish and kept going down at the 1 or the 2, then that was going to be how Saquon racked up those points. And we saw that. He scored his touchdowns from a little further out, and he's just a better running back than DeAndre Swift. I mean, obviously.
I'm sure that Nick Sirianni and co. trust him way more to get in the end zone from the 1 yard line as opposed to Swift, which might have been the reason why they were so reliant on the tush push.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we'll definitely still see the tush push, you know, when they do get stopped on the 1, if you get a little pass interference in the end zone, I'm sure that play's not going to go away, even though I will say it did look less effective week 1, but it's certainly not going to go away. Regardless, though, Saquon Barkley looking like you know, you don't want to overreact and say he's going to be a top 5 running back, but at least surefire RB1 and a guy that will at least return draft day value, if not exceed it in most leagues where, you know, he didn't go 5th overall like he did in ours. But even that might be a decent pick. Next up, I got Joe Mixon on here, Pat, because Joe Mixon,
he might be stud of the week, honestly.
You want to talk about quelling or just exceeding expectations. Joe Mixon in week 1, 30 carries for 159 yards and a touchdown, tacked on 3 catches for 19 yards, half PPR, finished with 25.3 points. And I did not expect him to look that good.
No, and the thing, too, is, like, you could say, like, oh, yeah, you know, had the Texans been winning this whole game and had it been a blowout, like, yeah, of course, this was a one-possession game for most of it. You know,
all throughout.
You know, they win by 2 points, so they were that dedicated to getting Joe Mixon the ball, even though the game script didn't necessarily, you know, lead in that direction. And not only did he get the opportunity, but he looked good. And, you know, we talked about how this is a bit of a better situation than in Cincinnati because as long as he's getting those similar opportunities, early downs, you know, at the goal line, this is, for all intents and purposes, a better offense. I mean, definitely what we saw, but definitely better than what we saw out of Cincinnati. So,
they look like they missed him week 1 against the Patriots. They missed Joe Mixon.
You know, is this going to be a sign to things to come every week? No, but I think more likely than not, Joe Mixon is going to be somebody that you can pretty comfortably put in your lineup on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I mean, you got to imagine, you know, the Texans put up 29 points in this game. And most offenses on a good year are going to average maybe 27, 26 points per game or so. So the Texans scored a good amount of points in this game. You got to imagine a lot of weeks those points are going to be scored through the passing game a little bit more. I mean, CJ Stroud had a perfectly fine day. It was like 18.6 fantasy points or something like that. 2 touchdowns, both to the other boomer that got added to this team, Stephon Diggs. But you imagine, you know, in certain games, the pass game will take a little bit more of a precedent. But regardless, you cannot ask for a better debut effort from Joe Mixon. And obviously his owners are going to be like, yeah, we'll gladly take games where he comes down a little bit from this because 159 yards and a touchdown is not what we're expecting. We will be perfectly happy with, you know, 80, 90 total yards and a touchdown on certain weeks if this is the ceiling that he can reach on other weeks. Crazy. You know, maybe another case, Pat, and, you know, you don't want to hindsight it too hard already after 1 week, but maybe another case where it's like, Devin Singletary was good in this offense, and Joe Mixon's better than Devin Singletary. Like, even in his advanced age.
And they were willing to give Devin Singletary upwards of 30 carries on 2 occasions last year. If they were willing to do that with Devin Singletary, of course they're going to be willing to do that with Joe Mixon. And I'm just scared what's going to happen when they have, the game script, the positive game script where they can just run the
45 carries.
I'm sure he won't get too much over 30, but, the fact that they can do it even in a close, he can do that even in a close game. He's never really been a huge guy in the passing game, so I don't think anyone really anticipated that anyway, but I think you're going to be fine without it.
Yeah.
Especially at the value where you were getting Joe Mixon.
Yeah, I mean, though, again, 1 week, Pat, but at this point, with how that performance looked and knowing the offense that he's attached to and the role he's going to have, it would surprise no one for Joe Mixon to finish as an RB1 this season, and that is great value for where you drafted him. The next stud I have on Mount Studmore here is Jaden Daniels. Just everything you hoped he would be from a fantasy perspective. Left a little to be desired from an NFL perspective, but you're obviously going to give him some grace there as it was his NFL debut. But he's doing exactly what every fantasy analyst who pumped him up said he would do, which is even in games where he doesn't provide, a whole lot in the passing game, he's going to be a cheat code running. And I think he was a cheat code running even more than maybe we expected. 16 carries for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, added 184 passing yards en route to 28.16 fantasy points.
My man had one less rushing attempt than completions. He had 17 completions and 16 rushes. And honestly, I feel like it could have been more in the passing game because they were losing. In the garbage time, you'd think that would be the time for him to throw. I guess he ran, but I think we're going to be seeing this in a lot of situations because that Washington defense got fucking cooked. That secondary, which was bad last year, is still bad. That said, they play the Giants this week. They're an excellent defensive stream. I don't care how bad they are. But it seems like they're going to be in a position where they are losing a good amount this year. Obviously, you want to see more from passing in real life, but fantasy, is he going to run the ball 16 times? No, he's not going to do that. But this guy, honestly, probably out of most of the Russian quarterbacks outside of Lamar, I'd say, Josh Allen, this guy's good. We know this guy's going to be involved on the ground no matter what.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. He doesn't need 16 carries in most games. I don't believe Jaden Daniels really broke off any one majorly big run. He may have had one for 15 or 20, but this is a guy that can win a week for you or make a good fantasy week for you off of one run. If he breaks a 50-yard touchdown like we saw, younger Lamar, not to say current Lamar's not capable of that, but younger Lamar do a little more often, even younger Jalen Hurts do. You break off a 50-yard touchdown as a quarterback, that's 11 points on one play. It tends to happen a little more for quarterbacks than running backs because they come off of broken plays where the defense is just all over the place. Absolutely. I feel like those kind of things are going to come for Jaden Daniels. The fact that he had 28 fantasy points in a game where we can look at it and say, yeah, he didn't play that well. Yikes. That is terrifying for anyone that has to face Jaden Daniels in fantasy football. So he is, as of now, everything you want in a fantasy football quarterback. And look, as far as how he plays real life, I think he's going to be just fine. At the very least, he has no risk of ever losing his job this season.
I was about to say, expectations cannot be particularly high for this team.
Yeah, definitely
rookie quarterback, new coach, new system, and they are still lacking in a lot of areas. That said, they're home against the Giants this week too, right? Yeah, I feel like they'll get in the win column relatively easily.
Oh man, that game is just avert your eyes if you actually want overall.
See, that's got Thursday night football written all over it, but we're blessed.
It does have Thursday night football written over it, except that the Thursday night football version of this game would somehow be Marcus Mariota versus Tommy DeVito, just by some virtue of bullshit. The final player I have on Mount Studmore for Week 1 is Jameson Williams. There weren't, Pat, I wouldn't say, a ton of players who really broke out Week 1. There were a handful. You've got Isaiah Likely, we'll talk about him, but any player that popped off were players that we've seen them pop off before, or was a rookie like Jaden Daniels where it wasn't a surprise because we know his rushing upside. Jameson Williams was a guy that we didn't know if it was going to actually happen or not. We heard the camp buzz, we knew of the talent, but we're in year 3 with JMO. We didn't know if he was actually going to put it together or not, and we won't know if this is sustainable for a little bit, but what a way to kick off year 3 for Jameson Williams. 5 catches, 121 yards and a touchdown, as well as a little carry for 13 yards, 21.9 fantasy points. And man, this man hates the Rams, I think, because he abused them in the playoffs last year.
This guy was unbelievable. He looked like Alabama Jamison Williams. Like maybe he needed this much time to recover from that injury and, his parlay problem. But not only was he making these big plays, you just look it out there and you're just like, this guy is fucking dangerous. And we talked about before the year, there are a lot of targets up for grabs. Like outside of Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta coming into the season, there's not really anyone else. That role is at least the third guy was there for Jamison Williams taking, and he took it. And again, I do not think we're talking about a week 1 fluke here. I am convinced that this is not a week 1 fluke. Obviously, you wanted to see more out of the Lions than we did, but I think the tides will turn for that as well. And am I like immediately plugging Jamison Williams into my lineup next week? Depends who I have, but he's on the radar now.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I don't think it's a fluke either. I do think, and this is probably semi-obvious, but like he's not going to do this every week, right? He's going to have dud weeks.
Of course.
Jamison Williams did this week 1 at the expense of Amon-Ra St. Brown, who we'll talk about in a minute, who had 3 catches for 13 yards. There are obviously going to be weeks where these stat lines are essentially flipped. There's going to be weeks where they both coexist and they both just have like 12 to 15 fantasy points. So I think it's important to understand that like Jamison Williams is not gonna be this uber consistent wide receiver 1 for your fantasy team, or at least I would be very surprised if he did, given all the weapons on this team. But the Detroit Lions, I mean, I don't know if there's a scarier offense in football right now, and like that's with a quarterback who is a little more limited skill set wise than say the
more
Chiefs
of a game manager than anything,
the Ravens. Yeah. But like God, this is. I think Goff and Brock Purdy are kind of on that same tier of like, this is a good quarterback, right? They may not have elite traits, but they're good at playing the quarterback position and surrounded by weapons. At this point, the Lions offense, if Jamison Williams is going to have this capability, the Lions offense may be more dangerous than the Niners offense, and they could very well motor their way to a Super Bowl appearance, Motor City their way to a Super Bowl appearance. So shout out to Jamison Williams. Jamison Williams, the only player on Mount Studmore for this week that might at least be available on waivers in your fantasy league, depending on league size. So we'll get into some waiver targets a little bit later. We won't really mention Jamison Williams. I don't think he's available in too many leagues, but on the off chance that he is, go get him. I mean, in ESPN leagues, Pat, he's rostered in 69.2% of leagues. So he's out there in some.
I would say, out of any of the guys that could realistically be on waivers, I'd say it's either him or J.K. Dobbins would be the priority pickup here.
Or Jordan Mason, who we'll talk about as well if he's out there.
Yeah.
But these are the guys. Like those are the guys that I'm like attacking in waivers for sure. Moving to the negative side of things, Pat, we've got Mount Bustmore. The first guy on here, and just again to reiterate, this is the 4 like biggest and just most painful busts of the week in fantasy football, according to me. Marvin Harrison Jr., your second round pick in fantasy, a guy that I heavily considered for my second round pick in fantasy as well. Look, regardless of what my concerns may have been about a rookie wide receiver having such a high investment you had to make to get him in your fantasy drafts, 1 catch for 4 yards in the NFL debut is not what even the most pessimistic, not even what the most pessimistic evaluator of Marvin Harrison would have expected. How are you feeling when that happened?
He's on our little panic segment here. But how was I feeling when it was happening? It was furious. If I saw Greg Dortch's tiny looking ass catching another football, and I'm at work, so I'm trying not to flip my lid every time I see this. Yeah. But the Cardinals, they were just very run forward. They looked good. I mean, they really fought hard with a good Bills team. But I'll talk more about how I feel about it going forward in our bit of a in our panic segment. But terrible. He was terrible.
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, it's a case where you you're expecting better going forward. It's just as bad of a debut as you can possibly have. So I guess we'll go through these Mount Busmore picks so that we can then get to our panic segment and really dive into how much we're freaked out by these. But the other guys on Mount Busmore, Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, just mentioned, 3 catches for 13 yards. A guy who was largely touted, Pat, as maybe the safest pick in the first round of fantasy drafts, and then is one of the only first rounders.
Was anyone worse than him in the first
bum.
I was going to say, who else was?
Christian McCaffrey has his own issues. You got Bijan. Bijan was fine. Brees had a great day.
Tyreek had a great day.
Jamar was fine. CD was,
Lamb was fine.
But this was definitely the worst, I think, stat line out of consensus first round picks in fantasy football. It was not a good day for our boy Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just a weird one. Granted, we know it was because partially Jameson Williams had such a good day, but you still expect more than that. Third on Mount Busmore has to be Mark Andrews. This is another guy who was obviously primetime game to actually fully kick off the season, first game of the season, and he was brutal. Took a backseat to Isaiah Likely in terms of production. Mark Andrews' stat line, we're looking at 2 catches for 14 yards. More importantly about that is it was on 2 targets. And we've seen a lot around social media ever since that this is what the Chiefs do to Mark Andrews, is they essentially try to take him out of the game.
And they turned him into a fucking left tackle.
Yeah, they turned him into a left tackle, and apparently not a very good one because Lamar was also under pressure all night. But Mark Andrews, not a good week 1. And then finally on Mount Busmore, we've also got Chris Olave. Maybe not the most disappointing one on Mount Busmore, but out of all of these teams, the Saints put up 47 points against the Carolina Panthers. And Chris Olave was simply not a part of it. You've got you have so many signs that Clint Kubiak was making positive contributions to this offense. I mean, the Saints, I know it was the Panthers, but the Saints were not a team last year capable of putting up 47 points with the way they were functioning on offense. So it was a great start for Clint Kubiak, but almost alarming that you can see the Saints put up 47 points in a game where Chris Olave is not involved, because at that point it's like, when is he going to be consistent for fantasy? Now, is Chris Olave going to put up? God, what did he end up finishing with?
2 for 11.
Was it 2 for 11? Yes, 2 catches for 11 yards. Also
on 2 targets.
2 targets.
On 2 targets.
Now, is he going to do that every week? Obviously not. But you worry again about the ceiling with him.
That's an ambiguous offense. We saw Raider legend Foster Moreau have a legitimately good game. They were throwing to the tight ends. They were throwing to running backs. He threw a jump ball to fucking Taysom Hill in the end zone.
I audibly yelled when I saw that. I was like, can we not do this?
Is Sean Payton here again or something? I was baffled by that one, but that's just one play. Yeah, we'll talk about these guys here who might be the most concerning. And I think it would probably just be the fact that this offense is just weird.
Yeah, it's a weird offense. I mean, Kamara had a good day. The Saints, I believe, had 2 tight ends finish in the top 5 of fantasy week 1.
Johnson and Moreau had a touchdown. Yeah. Moreau had 4 for 40 and a touchdown. That's a great day.
It's basically whichever tight ends score touchdowns will probably finish top 5 in fantasy on a given week. But the fact that there were 2 Saints, the fact that 2 Saints at all scored touchdowns after the type of offense we saw last year. I mean, Derek Carr is looking like fantasy QB1 right now. Certainly interesting and honestly disappointing from the Panthers side of things that this is, again, going to be a team that you just want to target for your fantasy team. Like, if your players are playing the Panthers, get those guys in your lineup. And if you have a defense that's facing the Panthers, get them out there, because this team does not look any improved from last year. But off the back of Mount Busmore, let's get into our panic meter now, Pat, because it's important to keep perspective, right? It's week 1. There were plenty of deceptive week 1 stat lines last season that did not hold. Most notably, I think, Mac Jones was 25.1 points last year in week 1. And I, as a Patriots fan, was convinced. I was like, Mac Jones is going to be our guy. Like, he's got it back. He's going to be good. 25 fantasy points in week 1. He looked good. And, obviously that absolutely tanked. There were other examples of other players that tanked after week 1. And then other players that bounced back after a terrible week 1. So you got to keep perspective. NFL's a small sample size league. They only play 17 games in the regular season versus 162 for baseball and 82 for the NBA. So it's hard to stay patient when you get this one game and it's all you have to ruminate over for the next week. But we're going to try to come at this objectively and figure out which of these bad performances we're actually worried about. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are we panicking on these players? And we'll start, Pat, with your boy, Marvin Harrison Jr.
2.
1. I mean, yeah, if I could go 0, I would.
Yeah, he ran 96% of routes that, on Kyler Murray dropbacks. He was always on the field. And Jonathan Gannon, after the game, said, they took him out of the game. He said, they were shadowing him. And, Trey McBride didn't have a great day either, but the underlying numbers for him look pretty good too. Honestly, I think it's encouraging the fact that we saw the Cardinals offense be as effective as it was. Really, well, Harrison was not a factor, and then with McBride kind of taking a back seat. This is going to be a run-first offense, but we saw that Kyler's not afraid to throw, and especially not afraid to throw to fucking Greg Dortch. But, he's a rookie in his first game with good underlying numbers, against a good defense that intentionally put the clamps on him. If he does this again next week, we'll revisit this subject, but
yep.
I am very, I got a lot of sell low requests on him, and do not sell low on Marvin Harrison. If your Marvin Harrison owner is willing to sell low on him, go get him. Go get him.
I think Marvin Harrison is the easiest buy low if that opportunity presents itself. I think, I want to believe that owners in most fantasy leagues aren't going to be panicking over players they invested highly in after 1 week. But maybe the fact that he's a rookie, people will be a little bit quicker to jump off the ship and, be like, he's just not that guy. I wouldn't worry about that. They invested the 4th overall pick in a guy to use him, and that is going to be the case after this week. Not worried about him in the slightest. If you can somehow get him for cheap, absolutely do that, because it's a guy that I still believe could put up wide receiver 1 numbers on the season as Kyler Murray's maybe not primary with Trey McBride, but one of his obviously primary.
Kyler looked good. Kyler looked really comfortable out there. Obviously, he had a whole offseason removed from the injury. He looked really good.
Yeah, absolutely. So no panicking on Marvin Harrison Jr. here. Just stay the course. It should be fine. Next, we've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Pat. Amon-Ra St. Brown, mentioned victim of Jameson Williams' big day. How much are you panicking on Amon-Ra St. Brown? 0.
1.
Telescope.
The telescope. We're talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown here. Like we said, the safe pick was not very safe this week, but I just think sometimes shit happens, and he's going to be more reliable than a guy like Laporta, who is pretty touchdown dependent, and a guy like Williams, who's pretty big play dependent. There are going to be games where he is getting targeted 10 to 12 times. And I'm just really not worried in the slightest.
Yeah, so I'm not worried either. But I will say I'm going to put it at like a 3. And it's not because so panic's the wrong word, right? Like Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be fine. He's going to be an elite receiver for your fantasy team. He's probably still going to be a wide receiver 1. But the fact is, last year he was operating as the only competent actual wide receiver on this team. And yes, they had Sam Laporta. Yes, they had, Jahmyr Gibbs as a weapon in the pass game as well. But otherwise, he was working with what? Josh Reynolds and whatever they were trying to do with Jameson Williams last year, Khalif Raymond. If they have another receiver now that has that sort of ceiling outcome, it dampens the outlook a little bit. It's not like I'm going to try to trade him. It's not like I think he's going to have a bad year. But like you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown's game logs from last year, he didn't really have a game like this at all. The worst game I'm seeing was against the Bears in December. He had 3 catches on 8 targets for 21 yards. So that was a bad game. But like to come out and start the season this way while Jameson Williams has such a blow-up performance like this, it just tells me, Amon-Ra St. Brown already had pretty low potential of being like the wide receiver 1, right? Like that was probably not going to be a thing for him because of him being a more safe player versus a ceiling player. I think that ceiling is just even a little lower now. And that's all I'm saying. So panic's the wrong word, but knowing that Jameson Williams is this guy and has this sort of potential now, I think you just have to lower expectations a little bit and understand that dud weeks like this may happen 1 or 2 more times the rest of the year. But overall, yes, Amon-Ra St. Brown's still going to be a stud for your team. You're going to be happy you have him. Just a little bit of a damp, because like this was the downside argument for him, last year? The year before, it was that, Jameson Williams, he's going to overtake. He's not overtaking him, but he's good now, and that's really all it is. Next up, we got Mark Andrews, Pat. Where are you at with Mark Andrews?
I would say like a 4.
Okay.
Obviously, if you look at Thursday in a vacuum, where he was the backup, he was the blocking tight end, and not only did we see him not involved, we saw the other tight end who performed well in his absence last year go off.
Yep.
You know, be the best tight end of the week. But the reason why I'm not fully panicking here is just that this is still a Ravens offense that doesn't have a lot of concrete weapons. Like, I think it could vary from game to game. Like, we saw Justice Hill be really involved, because partially I think because Lamar was under so much pressure and had to get rid of the ball, in which we also saw Lamar run a lot. Zay Flowers only catches the ball behind the line of scrimmage, it seems. Yep. And then besides Andrews and likely Rashad Bateman, but like he only had 2 catches. No. So like
we're done with Rashad Bateman. We're not
that's
doing
what I mean.
Bateman
that's
anymore. Yeah.
That's what I mean. I don't. But the fact is that he had a down game, but you know there is still a lot of room for targets in this offense when he is not being as hovered over as the Chiefs did to him. You know, the only reason why I'm scared is just that there is a younger, more athletic tight end in that offense.
Yeah, I think I'm right with you at about a 4. But I have concerns beyond just Isaiah Likely and the coverage. I worry about if the injury is still lingering or not. The leg injury he suffered last year, and then this car crash that he went through, during the preseason. I think majority of what held him back week 1 was the Chiefs' game plan. The Chiefs have done this to Mark Andrews over and over again. If you look at his game logs, Andy Holloway actually made a really great case, for why Andrews is going to be fine on Twitter, or X or whatever the fuck. And it was basically, Spagnuolo does this to Mark Andrews every time they play. He takes him out of the game. It just so happened that this time Isaiah Likely was up to the task of being the not fallback option, but the guy to be like, okay, you're going to cover Mark Andrews? Fine. I've taken a step forward now. I'm going to be the guy. I don't think Isaiah Likely's going anywhere. I don't think he's going to drop 100 yards and a touchdown on you every week on 9 receptions. But yeah, Mark Andrews, I think the game plan is definitely going to be more favorable for him, or the defensive, coverage or lack thereof will be more favorable for him in most other games. I think he's going to be all right. But it's just was there an element of he's not as explosive, he's not moving as well, and therefore he's not able to get open as easily? We'll see. But you're still confidently starting Mark Andrews for the next couple weeks at least, unless the sky really comes crashing down. So I'm at about a 4 with him.
Yeah, I'm still starting him over Isaiah Likely, I think. I think Andrews is...
I agree.
Despite Andrews having a terrible floor, I think on a week-to-week basis, Andrews' floor is going to be a little more consistent than Likely. We're going to see these blow-up games from Likely, but honestly, there may be games where he catches 1 pass.
Yeah.
I think it could really vary that much with him.
Yeah.
If you need a tight end, though, still go get him. Obviously,
oh, yeah,
we see his upside. You need a tight end, or even if you don't really need a tight end, go get him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely a priority claim this week regardless. Chris Olave. Where are we at with Chris Olave on the panic meter?
I would say a 5.
Okay.
And, obviously it'll be a spoiler alert, but similarly to another player we're going to talk about, the thing that scares me compared to some of these other guys is we really haven't seen Chris Olave have a stud year at wide receiver, fantasy-wise. Last year he compiled numbers pretty well. If you just look at the stats, he had a decent year. But we have yet to see him be a true impact fantasy player on a week-to-week basis. So there is that level of doubt, maybe that's just not who he is in the NFL. And you look at a Saints offense where Derek Carr and his Alvin Kamara fetish still exists. And the fact that, they've got a legitimate deep threat in my boy Rashid Shaheed. 2 of my boys from the heavy days, Rashid Shaheed and Chigakonkwo both scored. I couldn't help but not think about that. And gotta clear my throat. All right, and we're back. They have a legitimate deep threat, and Juwan Johnson's a great red zone target, and then Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill, it's not that there's a lot of mouths that need to be fed in that offense. I just think there's a lot of mouths that are going to be fed in that offense.
Yeah, I think 5's the right number. Not to ride your coattails on anything here, but
you're picking first next time.
Okay, I'll pick first next time. Chris Olave, I believe in him so much as a player. I watched him so much his rookie year and was so impressed with just how he plays the receiver position that it frustrates me that he has yet to be able to put together a full season or a longer stretch of productivity. I saw somebody put it this way about Derek Carr, and I thought, that kind of makes some sense. And it's that Derek Carr's two things that he will do within the realm of a football game is check it down short or throw it fucking as deep as he can. And Chris Olave doesn't really fit either of those things because they have Rashid Shaheed, who's better suited to be the deep bomb guy. That's his whole repertoire, essentially. And then check down, they've got Alvin Kamara, who might not be anybody better in the league at catching those types of routes and those types of passes. And it's like Chris Olave is the guy who's going to occupy the middle of the field, those short to intermediate routes, those 15, 20, 25-yard receptions that they'll be there, but that's not Derek Carr's strong suit or his preference. So I just think... it's concerning again. Like I said, they score 47 points and he's not a part of it. The worry about Olave coming into the year, despite how much the new offensive coordinator and the motion was supposed to help him, was that he may just not have very good chemistry with Derek Carr, and I'm worried after 1 week that is still going to be the case.
The one thing that I think we need to just kind of pump the brake on is the fact that they were up big in this game. They did not really have to throw a lot in the second half of this game. And this is a Saints team that I personally don't think is going to be very good. Not terrible, but this is not going to be the game script on a week-to-week basis. So I'd like to see them in a situation more where they are trailing or, in a more competitive game when they need to throw the ball more to see what Olave's participation is like.
Yeah, what are they going to do in a game where, the defense isn't just leaving everyone open and they have to hopefully, actually resort to their best players and their best playmakers? I think that's a fair point. It's just, it is concerning that this is how the season starts for Olave when the offense looks good and he still doesn't. So I think we're at kind of mid-level panic for Olave. The thing that sucks about him, Pat, is that he's at risk for fantasy purposes of becoming like last year's sort of T. Higgins type of player and staying that way, where he's so frustrating to have in your lineup. You can't really take him out. You want to leave him in, but there's going to be weeks where he goes for 2, and you kind of just have to know that. And to me, that's the most annoying type of player to have in your lineup. So hopefully he can shed that outlook eventually. Next up, we've got one of my boys here on my team, Dalton Kincaid. My panic meter for Dalton Kincaid, I'm going to put at, I think he's kind of a similar situation to Chris Olave, but I'm going to put it down to a 4. Because again, it's another one where it's a guy that we wanted to take a step forward this year. The offense put up points, and yet he was not a part of it. In fact, he was only targeted 2 times. Now, if you look around on Twitter a little bit, you'll see that Dalton Kincaid was covered seemingly pretty well in this game. So I'm not jumping off the ship with Kincaid, but am I worried about the fact that he only got 2 targets after all the talk of the offseason was he should be their number 1 receiver? Yeah, I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, if we're talking relative to that, then that's fair.
Yeah, it's just Dalton Kincaid is I don't know. I think there's going to be better days ahead for sure. But again, it's just not how you want to start the year. You think about the fact that they spend all this time game planning for week 1. This is what we want our team identity to be. This is what we want to look like. I feel like if Dalton Kincaid was the guy that we wanted him to be from a target volume perspective, he would have gotten more than 2 targets week 1. That's all. I don't see a reason that he won't be at least as good as he was toward the end of last year, where he was very much a startable fantasy asset. But I just think the panic meter rating is more so about, I think the odds of him finishing as this dark horse tight end 1 overall, tight end 2 overall has taken a pretty big hit based on the week 1 usage.
We talked all off season where it's someone's got to be the guy in this offense.
Or not.
No, they don't. No, they don't. 10 different pass catchers got a target with 9 making a catch in this game. This could just be a case of a really good quarterback throwing to whoever's open on a given play or whoever's there on what they feel is the best drawn-up play. And I'm still going to go at a 3 here. Just because, again, similarly to a guy Similarly to a guy like Trey McBride, good underlying numbers. He was on the field, his participation, 83%. So, he was out there, especially compared to a guy that I thought was going to be really involved, Curtis Samuel, who was only out there like 30% of the time, a 30% route run. So and I do think there are going to be weeks where he is kind of going to be more relied on. And there are going to be weeks where Allen hones in on guys depending on the matchup. With how desolate tight end looks right now, every year, we're talking about how this could be a great year for tight end. Week 1, it was terrible. But with that being said, again, like you're also starting Dalton Kincaid. Sure. Week 2 here, if you have him, again, unless I drafted Mark Andrews and Dalton Kincaid in the league to be funny. Joke's on me, asshole. I still won somehow last week, but dropped 150. Don't ask me how. But yeah, fuck. But you're still starting Dalton Kincaid, and I think that the floor is going to come up a little bit more, and this could just be a case of. Sometimes it takes a few games for guys to truly emerge as the top dog in an offense. But like you said, I think the chances of that happening have been hit pretty good with just the fact that Josh Allen just doesn't care. We saw they had fucking Stephon Diggs last year, and he barely threw him the ball the last 8 weeks of the season. They don't care. As long as they're winning games and being a productive offense, that's what they care about in Buffalo.
Yeah, I did broach the idea that the Bills could just be the new Chiefs of last year, where it's like no pass catcher really steps up for a while, and it could be the case. Josh Allen may just backpack on his own and rush for another 15, maybe 20 touchdowns. He got 2 in week 1 already, so we'll see. Speaking of quarterbacks, Pat, in the AFC, we've got Joe Burrow. I'll take the first rating on this one again. Panic meter is like a 1 or a 2 because we know who Joe Burrow is. We know he's good. But for me, with that said, I'm benching him this week without question if I have another competent option because the Bengals keep doing this shit. Like they started slow last year. Burrow started slow last year, and we were like, it made sense, right? He missed all of the preseason with the calf injury. He's not up to speed. Blah blah blah. But then we remember they kind of did this the year before as well, and now they're doing it this year, and it's like, what's the excuse? He played all of the preseason. I know there's obviously the drama of Jamar Chase's contract, and T. Higgins didn't play in this game, but that's still no excuse for losing to my New England Patriots. Thrilled about that, by the way, but what the fuck, Cincinnati? That is not okay to look that bad against the Patriots. Now this week they face the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, I'm making Burrow prove it. That Burrow is a guy that is not going to add a ton of value with his legs. He'll chip in a little here and there sometimes, but this is not a guy that going up against a good team and a solid defense that after how bad he looked week 1 and after how much this has become a trend over the last few years, I'm making him prove it. Or at the very least, I'm going to sit him this week, and then, I'll throw on my blindfold and hope for the best against the Commanders week 3 because it's the Commanders.
Yeah.
So you're probably starting him there, and then against the Panthers week 4. But, as far as week 2 is concerned, I'm sitting him. As far as long-term concerned, they do this. They put it together after a month. It's annoying that it happened for seemingly no reason and against the Patriots, but long-term, it's fine.
I think there's good reason. The fact that they don't have T. Higgins, and that was, a week of injury. It wasn't a case where, they knew they were going in with no T. Higgins. They went in with an uncertain situation on Jamar Chase. Granted, he did fine. That all worked out fine. And the fact that, he's still coming off an injury here, just like, some of these other guys. And I think you combine all that together, you need to just give it a few weeks. So, if you really want to play the matchup there, then have them sit down this week. But like you said, Washington week 3 will be a good matchup. I'll go a 2. The lack of rushing upside still hurts. But I think, once they get T. Higgins back, once Jamar Chase is there, practicing on a regular basis rather than flipping a coin seemingly on whether he was going to play or not. If you have a better option this week, take that better option, but...
And also, not for nothing, but, there is an element of, slow start. A lot of those drives stalled out. But, there were effectively 2 touchdowns taken away from Joe Burrow due to poor play from his tight ends. Tanner Hudson got one ripped out of his arms by Kyle Duggar on what should have been a walk-in touchdown. And then Mike Gesicki just didn't hold on to the ball on what we thought was a touchdown. That's 2 passing touchdowns for Burrow right there, and we're not having this conversation. So they are starting slow. Yoshi, my boy. They are starting slow, but also understand this week could have been a little less slow for Burrow. I'm still sitting him against the Chiefs. I guess you can't say that like across the board that you should sit him because I don't know what quarterbacks are available in your league. Many of you who drafted Burrow likely don't have a backup on your bench, so you have to go case by case. But I'm looking for other options just for this week. I'm going to make him show me something first.
I just saw in chat, like, would Jaden Daniels be a better option? By a mile.
God,
by a mile. Against the
Jaden
Giants.
Daniels might be the better option for the rest of the season, let alone this week.
Yeah, debatable. But this week, absolutely. That's exactly the kind of guy you should be turning to.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I look at our league, our waiver wire in terms of quarterbacks, and it's like, Justin Herbert against the Panthers, I'm not uninterested in. I mean, that's more of a toss-up, I think. Jared Goff against the Buccaneers, I'd be interested in. So, yeah, I would just explore some other options there. And then last guy on our panic meter, Drake London, another of your receivers in our main league. You got him in the third round. Drake London, like a 6 or 7, 6.5. Kirk looked really bad, and that's a problem. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if he's still hurt, if he's just not confident in the ankle, but the Achilles. But there were some throws that were like head scratching for a guy like Kirk Cousins, who has historically been such an accurate passer, such a powerful passer. And you see him kind of throwing off his back foot, throwing just with his arm. The ball lands in the dirt. The entire case for Drake London was he finally will have a quarterback that can push the ball to him, push it down the field, and he's going to be Kirk's, less talented but new version of Justin Jefferson. And if Kirk's not Kirk, that's an issue. Now, we'll be having a different conversation if at some point Michael Penix finds his way into the lineup. But if that happens, we're a month or 2 months at least away from that.
They paid Kirk a lot of money, even though they used a lot of capital on Penix. They're going to let Kirk try and right the ship here.
Yeah, but it's concerning. And like you wonder what are we waiting for now with London? Like, what are we expecting is going to improve? Like, is Kirk just going to magically look better next week? Was it truly just a confidence thing? Like, he's not feeling right with the Achilles? Not
Steelers' defense is pretty formidable as well.
The Steelers' defense is formidable, and there's a chance that even if he's not confident in that Achilles, that against other defenses he'll be able to get away with a little bit more. They've got the Eagles this week. I don't know if that's going to go a lot better. Obviously, their defense isn't as good as the Steelers is, but still just a tough team to play against on Monday Night Football on the road. I'm worried about Drake London because if the quarterback play is going to be like this, it's not much different than what it was last year with Desmond Ridder. And it's Groundhog Day over and over again for these poor Falcons pass catchers. Kyle Pitts caught a touchdown at least.
Hooray!
Hey, Merry Christmas. But yeah, it's concerning for Drake London and these Falcons pass catchers.
Yeah, of everyone on this list, I'm the most concerned about Drake London, and that's not as an owner of Drake London, that's more just in general, because obviously he was the guy I was alluding to when talking about Chris Olave, where while we saw Drake London accumulate to over 1,000 yards last year, he was never a reliable guy to be in your fantasy lineup, and we all basically kind of went on vibes this year and believing in Kirk Cousins coming off a torn Achilles to elevate him. And Kirk looked awful. That's the reason why I'm more concerned about him than Olave, is that Kirk looked awful. Derek Carr looked fine. Like, Derek Carr looked like a quarterback. Like, if Derek Carr was in Atlanta right now, played the way he did last week, I'd feel better about this, which is crazy to say. But, I do think at the end of the day, though, Kirk starts to get better and starts to get back more like himself. And I think that's really the big thing that happens here. I mean, London ran a route. God, I have the number. Where the every time he dropped back, 100% of dropbacks, he was on the field running routes. He is going to be involved in that offense. Ray McLeod is not going to lead the team in targets every week.
That's what you think.
That's what Charlie Warner or whoever the fuck. Yeah, I'm just worried, though, like I said, because we haven't seen him be a reliable guy yet with that big of a question mark at quarterback.
Yeah.
But yeah, I made two pretty high potential, high fall off picks in rounds 2 and 3, and I'm feeling the pain after this week.
What's your panic meter number on Drake London? I don't think I got an actual number from you.
5.
5. Okay, a little bit lower than me, and that's fair. Okay, off the panic meter now, Pat. Let's get into the injuries, and sadly, a lot of them. One of them, man, just backhanded, blindsided fantasy owners.
I almost lost the league because of that shit.
Christian McCaffrey ended up being inactive due to calf, leg, Achilles, whatever, various injuries. It's reportedly now tendinitis, which could keep him out for an extended period of time. Schefter saying he is at least at risk of missing week 2. This was not expected. We knew he was dealing with an injury. We still fully expected him to be active. And yeah, left McCaffrey owners very much scrambling if you didn't have Jordan Mason on your bench. A guy in our league specifically had to go out and pick up, at first it was Kyle Juszczyk, which he should have stuck with, and then ended up picking up Isaac Guerrero, who I don't believe saw any work in that game.
No.
This is a tough injury, and it seems like one that the vibes just aren't very good, and he could miss some significant time. It kind of continues the curse of the number 1 overall pick in fantasy football, and you gotta hope you have Jordan Mason, because if you're a Christian McCaffrey drafter or owner and you don't, and you're presumably last in your waiver order, or maybe you just throw 100% of your fab dollars on Mason, it's a tough spot. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it at this point.
You're in a tough spot too, because just like, what if Mason is not a real long-term play? What if McCaffrey misses 1 more game, maybe 2? You're looking at someone that you should probably be a priority pickup for this week, but you don't want to blow your load, proverbially, all over Jordan Mason. But the thing that really impressed me, well, not impressed me, it was just a good sign, was that he was the only running back with a touch. Like, they gave Debo 6 carries, but no other running back on that roster had a rush. They completely trusted him to be the guy with Christian McCaffrey out. So if you handcuffed McCaffrey with Jordan Mason, you've got to be feeling fucking fantastic right now, because either you're going to have Christian McCaffrey or you're going to have a guy that Kyle Shanahan trusts in that offense to be the focal point. He was the focal point of that offense last night in a very, very good performance.
Yeah, it's not encouraging on McCaffrey. I think Jordan Mason's going to be pretty consistently good every week. So if he's available on your waiver wire and you have a chance at him, I mean, I would blow my load for Jordan Mason 100%. Definitely. Like
we have seen it in the past. Like, remember a couple of years ago when like McCaffrey got there and they're like, why are they giving Elijah Mitchell 10 carries in a game?
Yeah.
That could very well happen even when McCaffrey's back with Jordan Mason.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it doesn't, like, this is a guy that can win you weeks in the time that McCaffrey's gone. Like, every game counts, and this is a guy that could be 20-plus fantasy points off your waiver wire. Like, you gotta prioritize this guy, in my opinion, more than maybe anyone else that's on waivers. Even like a guy like Jameson Williams, who's more likely to have value for the entire course of the season. Different position, obviously. Next injury that we want to cover here is Jordan Love. So, Jordan Love got injured at the very end of the Eagles-Packers game. MCL injury, not going on IR, which is a good sign, but is expected to miss multiple games. We're expecting probably 2 to 3 weeks at this point. Just really puts a damper on any investment you have in the Packers offense. I don't know that anyone outside of Jaden Reed is startable. I mean, Pat, I was looking forward to talking about just kind of the Packers receiver distribution and our outlook on them for the rest of the season. But we kind of have to table it right now because Malik Willis can't throw the ball. Malik Willis has 0 passing touchdowns.
They should genuinely start
good.
Sean Clifford.
I wouldn't be angry about it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why they're not. I mean, I'm sure it's because Sean Clifford is just bad. And
also bad,
is worse than Malik Willis, because there's a reason they're starting a guy they acquired 2 weeks ago. But, it's like the devil from the public perspective. It's the devil we know versus the devil we don't, and the devil we know is Malik Willis, and he blows. So I think this really kind of kills your Packers receivers. I think Jaden Reed is startable as long as you lower expectations. You can throw him in your flex. He's, again, we've talked about it many times, the guy that they will still manufacture touches for. So you're kind of just hoping he can make a play with the ball, which, I mean, yes, it was with Jordan Love, but he did that many times in their first game against the Eagles. He was one of the biggest bright spots of fantasy football in week 1 was Jaden Reed. But you really have to table your Romeo Dobbses, your Christian Watsons, and especially your Dontavian Wickses, who barely played.
I think the whole appeal to Romeo Dobbs was that Jordan Love might have been sexually attracted to him. Like, he was out there, he ran almost 90% of the routes, as opposed to Watson and Reed, who were at 73. He was the guy for Jordan Love. There's a great chance that he's not Malik Willis's or Sean Clifford's guy. I do like Reed in the sense that that Matt LaFleur is going to draw plays for Jaden Reed. You saw it. Is he going to be as electric as he was? And he had a touchdown called back as well. I had plus 1,200 first touchdown score, so I wasn't thrilled with that one for multiple reasons. But obviously, I don't think he's going to produce quite as well on a per-touch basis as he did, but I think just the fact that we know that he's going to be involved no matter who's playing quarterback there, and the fact that all he needs is a dump off or a handoff to be productive.
Yeah. The one small case I will make, and it's not to start Romeo Dobbs by any stretch, but just to keep an eye on him, is that when quarterbacks are bad like this, sometimes they generally have a tough time progressing off their first read. And I think the odds that Romeo Dobbs is the first read on a decent amount of routes is pretty high because he is that ex-receiver sort of guy. Jaden Reed's still the better play, and I'm not proactively starting Romeo Dobbs at all. I just wouldn't be surprised if he's maybe a little better than we think, but yeah, I'm not excited about any.
It just depends on whoever's playing quarterback, the connection, but they're not going to have that Jordan Love connection. But for all we know, Dobbs could be one of the guys he's looking to first.
Yeah.
The fact that Luke Musgrave is just the backup.
Yeah, it's Tucker Kraft season.
Tucker Kraft, based on snaps and routes run, was the clear tight end one in that offense. Not that you're probably going to start a Packers tight end, but still worth noting.
They are eating the Kraft mac and cheese over there in Green Bay, and there's plenty of cheese. So after Jordan Love, Pat, we've got a pretty brutal injury, a guy who is going on IR, Puka Nacua. Obviously had the knee injury in the preseason. We were led to believe that it was no longer a concern. Not a coincidence that he re-injures it in week 1. So he's going to be out for 4 games, and the Rams then have a bye week 6. So the earliest we are going to see Puka Nacua is week 7. Absolutely brutal hit for Puka drafters. You are going to be without him for half your fantasy season, essentially. And this one just sucks.
Yeah, this one really sucks. And, he was looking pretty good, but Cooper Kupp is going to be a huge problem.
Oh, my God. 21 targets. 21 targets.
Most likely you got Cooper Kupp in the 3rd round. That might be the best value ever.
Congrats on getting possibly the wide receiver 1 overall for the season. And
possibly the number 1, the number 1 overall running back wide receiver. Like, he is going to be a humongous problem. And we did see it, though, that Matthew Stafford spread the ball around a little bit. We saw Tyler Johnson. We saw your boy Colby Parkinson. We saw Demarcus Robinson. While those guys aren't going to be guys you're going to pick up to play, those are certainly guys that should be picked up at the very least because, see how this progresses going forward. We know Kupp's going to be the guy, but after that, things are wide open. And at the end of the day, he's not going to only throw to Cooper Kupp. I mean, maybe. Like,
it's going to feel like
he doesn't even have a Cooper Kupp fetish. They've fucked before. You can't tell me otherwise. You cannot tell me otherwise. But
spiritually, not hypothetically, metaphorically.
No,
Pat say it literal.
No, I'm saying literally. I'm going for it. But I guess another thing, just very quickly to note, Blake Corum did not play.
Yeah.
Ronnie Rivers got 2 touches, and it was the Kyren show. So all of those worries about Kyren are also going to kind of look pretty silly. And, I got him at 19 in a draft, and I think that's going to be an excellent, excellent value.
Yeah, I mean, we'll expect, some better days from Kyron. Obviously, the efficiency wasn't awesome in this game, but they kind of just committed to chucking the ball almost 50 times from Matthew Stafford. So that won't be the case every game, obviously. But yeah, you looking at these other Rams pass catchers, like Demarcus Robinson was really good at the tail end of last year. He was a startable flex play, putting up wide receiver 2 numbers at the end of last season. So I could very well see that picking back up. But yeah, I think at the very least, both of the Rams receivers are worth taking a stab at. Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson. And then if you're in need of a tight end, I love the Colby Parkinson.
Especially with how bad tight end was week 1. Like, if you're just trying to throw a dart at someone, I think Colby Parkinson will be better in the sense that we talk about a lot of tight ends need touchdowns. He doesn't. Yeah. Like, he had 4 for 40. Whatever, 8 points. Not terrible. But, I think he's going to probably catch four passes in a given week there. So we'll see if it turns into touchdowns, even though it's going to be the Cooper Kyron show when they get anywhere near the end zone.
Oh, man, I wish I got Cooper Kupp in our draft, although I wasn't really in a position to get him.
You know what's funny? Had I stayed at 2, I would have been able to get him on the turnaround, which I would have absolutely done it. Yeah. Instead, I got fucking Drake London. Thanks, everybody. I'll show myself out.
Gotta love fantasy football. All right, next injury. We've got a couple of tight ends here. Jake Ferguson is week to week with a sprained MCL, and David Njoku, high ankle sprain, expected to miss a few weeks. So Ferguson's seems less severe than Njoku's at this point.
It looked bad, man. Like, I saw my season flash before my eyes when that happened. I thought he was done.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Ferguson goes, there's not really a tight end move that you're making. I mean, I don't even know who the Cowboys backup
is it Luke Schoonmaker?
It might be Luke Schoonmaker. That's a wait and see play. I think the takeaway here is that it's Brandon Cooks that you want if he's available in your league.
Absolutely.
He was already good for a long stretch last year, but now if you have a guy who, again, Jake Ferguson led all tight ends and was up there in terms of all players in red zone targets last year. Not that Brandon Cooks is this like dominant red zone target, but when that goes away, that void has to get filled somewhere, and Cooks could at least take a small margin of it, or they might just take a few more, deep shots than normal because Ferguson, that safety blanket, isn't going to be available underneath. Yeah. So that's the move there.
And you look at it, if you take Ferguson out of the equation, Cooks and Lamb were the only 2 Cowboys that had more than 2 targets. There were an awful lot of guys that caught a pass, but they all had 1 or 2 targets. I don't really feel confident in saying that a guy like Jalen Tolbert or fullback legend Hunter Lepke are going to get particularly involved. But yeah, Brandon Cooks is the guy. Obviously, if you have CeeDee Lamb, you love this. I mean, he already had 10 targets. A bit of I'll call it an underwhelming day from CeeDee Lamb. Not terrible, but not what you wanted, not what you expected.
Definitely not.
And yeah, those 2, I think, are going to be very good looking forward here.
Yeah, and then as far as Njoku goes, there's not really a move to make. The Browns fucking blow. Deshaun Watson fucking blows. Like, he was already not going to get Njoku the ball.
Yo, Bran, get this guy out of here. Get this guy to the fucking chat.
Oh, I didn't see it. Oh, yeah. Okay.
He just did it right now. Get this.
Yeah, don't do that shit, you idiots. Yeah, Deshaun Watson is not good, so we're not going after any pass catchers really on the Browns other than Amari Cooper. So
Jordan Akins is.
Yeah, Jordan Akins is going to just be great. No, we're not doing that.
And we didn't mention this is injury talk here, but Jerome Ford looked pretty good. The Cowboys defense was stout, but I loved the usage. I loved the garbage time touchdown. But as a Jerome Ford owner, is Jerome being one of my favorites? We're cool.
Yeah. All right, finishing out with a couple more injuries here. Rome Odunze week to week with a sprained MCL. Not really a guy you were putting in your lineup anyway, but just this will give you more confidence in Keenan Allen, who was one of the leaders in just target share and air yard share. And so the demise of fat Keenan Allen was greatly exaggerated, and his outlook will be helped, I think, if Rome Odunze misses some time. Obviously, we don't want to see him miss some time. We want to see the young guy, out there. But if he does miss time, that's looking good for Keenan Allen, as long as Caleb Williams is capable of throwing for more than 93 yards in a given game. Jordan Addison has an ankle injury with significant soreness, could miss week 2. Another injury that I don't really think has much impact on your fantasy team. I mean, Sam Darnold looked pretty good week 1. I mean, he started 12 for 12 passing, but that still didn't result in a ton of volume for anybody. And even Justin Jefferson finished with it was around 60 yards and a touchdown. So I don't think you're too excited to start the wide receiver 2 just yet in a Sam Darnold offense. So, losing him, you don't want to lose a player from your fantasy team, but I think you can get equal production from somebody on your bench or somebody off the waiver wire,
I agree.
Even like a DeMarcus Robinson if you have to. I'd prefer DeMarcus Robinson to a healthy Jordan Addison right now, to be honest.
Wow. And I mean, tough matchup. They've got the 49ers now, who are a fucking buzzsaw, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finally, this one sucks. We got to keep an eye on this one, though. So Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, this Dolphins backfield, much maligned for their possible injury proneness. I mean, you can't make it up that they're both hurt after week 1, right? So it's one we got to watch. What?
It's Jeff Wilson time, baby.
Shut the fuck up. It's one we can't react to too much as we are recording the show on a Tuesday because the Dolphins play on Thursday Night Football. Obviously, we want them practicing now, but if there is any sort of, they're just dinged up and we want to keep them fresh and not make a small problem into a big problem, it would be that they are being held out of practices a couple days before Thursday Night Football. Now, if they don't get any activity in tomorrow, being Wednesday, the day before the game, then that's a concern for sure. And you got to look at, depending on if one or both are out, Jeff Wilson may be the carry leader on this team.
As much as we love Jalen Wright, as
Yeah.
much as we love Jalen Wright as the player, he was not a factor at all, and Jeff Wilson was.
Well, Jalen Wright was inactive, in fairness, and if these two are both out,
he'll be active.
That
of
won't
course,
be the case.
But Jeff Wilson is the guy instead of Jalen Wright. And we'd like to think he'll be involved, but if both of those guys are out, I think Jeff Wilson's the guy. I think you gotta. I know you're a big Jeff Wilson fan as well from one of your 17 championship years. He's one of my favorites just because he's some big fat dummy who falls into the end zone a lot. But as much as Jalen Wright is going to get this boost, and it's funny because Achane was the guy here. And for such an efficient player, he was not efficient on the ground. But
the targets,
but the targets are unreal. The receptions are unreal. This guy is the guy. And Raheem Mostert is kind of just looking like
he might be dust. It might be a
backup. Yeah, he's just kind of looking like someone. The upside's not there. If it was the other way around and say Mostert was getting those kinds of touches with Achane, at least Achane has the upside. Raheem Mostert just does not have that upside, especially when you've got a guy like Jeff Wilson, very similar player in terms of, not in skill, but in terms of what they're going to give you out there.
No, I mean, Raheem Mostert flat out looked slow, and it wasn't more than a year ago, Pat. It was exactly a year ago, that we were looking at this backfield of Mostert and Wilson, and they were even in everyone's eyes. That's what their backfield's going to be. We didn't know Achane was going to emerge like he did, but that was how we were heading into last season until Wilson got put on IR to open the year. It was Wilson and Mostert were even on an even playing field. As far as if both these guys are out, I think both Wilson and Wright are startable because I don't see a world where Mike McDaniel is going to just make Jeff Wilson a bell cow. He'll give him plenty of touches.
No, Jalen Wright will be out there, but I also wouldn't be surprised if some mystical other player, I don't even know who they have.
They're just going to give Alec Ingold
Hell yeah, brother.
He actually got a few touches toward the end of the last game.
Yeah, he deserves it.
The running backs getting hurt. But I would expect it to be the Wilson and Wright show, regardless of what mystical being might be somewhere on this team. I don't know, bring back Savon Ahmed or something.
Bruh.
So we gotta watch out for Mostert and Achane here.
That was a name that just
he just got cut. He recently got.
Oh, I know. He's still and Myles Gaskin's still poking around as well.
Yeah, Myles Gaskin, Carol Baskin. Okay, so that's our injury update right now. Keep an eye on Mostert and Achane on a short week for sure. We'll run through these real quick, Pat, before we get to our waiver targets. So we have been looking for answers on these split backfields, and some of these backfields ended up being split, and we weren't even expecting them to be. So we'll go from kind of every end of the spectrum here, starting with the one that I think was maybe the most intriguing, or at least was certainly up there, the Tennessee Titans. I genuinely believed them when they said it was going to be 1A and 1B.
I did too.
Tony Pollard was 1, and Tyjae Spears was 2, and that was what this was.
I think there is some decent things to look at in Spears from the sense that he ran more routes, got more targets. But Tony Pollard is going to be their guy on first down. He's going to be their guy at the goal line. And the fact that Pollard wasn't that far off in terms of routes run, it shows the fact that they're not afraid to have him out there on third down as well. Tony Pollard is absolutely the guy you want here. Tajay Spears went from an intriguing flex guy to I would not be starting Tajay Spears if I owned him.
I don't think Tajay Spears is startable right now until we see something change, just because it was such a wide discrepancy, not in production, but in workload and then thus production. 16 carries for 82 yards and a touchdown for Tony Pollard, added 3 catches for 12 yards. Tajay Spears only 4 carries for 21 yards and then 4 catches for 11 yards, so added some juice for those of you that may have started him in PPR to make him not completely useless, but not a good day for Tajay Spears. A backfield, Pat, that we heard some buzz about the backup, but we didn't think it was going to be a split backfield. It was split down the middle. Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. Tank Bigsby put up 12 carries for 73 yards. He outproduced Travis Etienne, who put up also 12 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown, but he also boofed the ball out of the end zone on a fumble. So didn't really pass the eye test in terms of looking better than Tank Bigsby in this one.
No, the only thing that I think would still lean towards Travis Etienne is just playing. Yeah. Etienne was out there for 72% of the snaps, as opposed to Bigsby for 32. So that's still a big discrepancy. It also means to say that Bigsby was very efficient. Not only he was getting touches while he was out there, but also what he was doing with that, because he looked better. He just kind of looked better.
Yeah, this was always kind of back of mind concern with guys like Travis Etienne and also, Rachaad White, who we can talk about a little later as well. My boy Bucky Irving. Bucky didn't really eat into the workload necessarily, but it's a starter. When the starter just has such heavy moments of inefficiency like Travis Etienne did in really the whole second half of last year, you wonder. I think the thing was, the reason we weren't super in on Tank is because Tank looked even worse last year. Granted, rookie, so it was maybe an oversight to not expect him. Under him, Yeah, not to kind of rule out him taking a step forward, which he appears to have done. So definitely a backfield to watch. And if Tank Bigsby's available in your league, I would go after him as well. Zach Moss, 9 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown, added 2 catches for 17 yards, worked well ahead of Chase Brown, who had 3 carries for 11 yards and added 3 catches for 12 yards as well. Maybe the most notable part of this, Moss actually out-targeted Chase Brown 4-3 as well. This was the type of game script, with the Bengals being unexpectedly close/trailing the Patriots all game, that you would expect Chase Brown to maybe take a bigger workload, and he didn't. And this tells me Zach Moss is the pretty clear RB1 for this team. Chase Brown's going to mix in, but I feel a lot better about, especially my pick of Zach Moss, as hoping to have a useful back on my bench. This is Zach Moss's backfield right now, and I didn't expect it to be that clear.
Yeah, the targets one is what, puts the icing on the cake for me. They just clearly trust him better to pass protect, probably, on third down. And the fact that, he's never proven to be a great receiving back, but also not a bad one. But yeah, and like we talked about, better days are ahead for this Bengals team. So if this is still Moss's offense, you could be looking at a guy that you're considering to start on a weekly basis. He's not going to be a set it and forget it kind of guy, but at least someone on your radar.
I'm certainly excited about the prospect of what he will look like in a functional Bengals offense. Especially since I have Devon Achane, who may just be made of peanut brittle at this point. The Chargers backfield, J.K. Dobbins. What a story for week 1. Wow. 10 carries for 135 yards and a touchdown, added 3 catches for 4 yards. He split in terms of workload with Gus Edwards, who had 11 carries himself, actually more than Dobbins, for 26 yards, and then added a catch for 2 yards. So yeah, Dobbins massively outproduced Gus Edwards. Great to see just how explosive he still looks. Despite the crazy number of injuries. Torn ACL, torn Achilles in the last 3 years. All levels of medicine say he should not be able to do this. And it remains to be seen, what he's going to look like over the course of a full season. But as of right now, you can start J.K. Dobbins and feel pretty good about it, I think.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, if he's on your waiver wire, run.
Yeah.
Run and go get him, because barring injury, knock on wood, I hope he stays healthy, he's going to be that guy. Kamani Vidal, healthy scratch. He's a guy that could be dropped for right now, because I don't think that's worth stashing a guy who's a healthy scratch on what is still going to be a bad team. We don't need to talk about what happened in the game they played this week, but they played against an unknown team, and the game script was in the running back's favor. But
definitely wasn't your Raiders that they faced and beat.
Who? But it was clear as day that Dobbins was the more explosive player. He was the more efficient player. And, Gus Edwards will not go away. He is going to be a pain at the goal line. But this team wants to run the ball. And if J.K. Dobbins is that guy, no matter the game script, even if they're planning to get killed, they're still going to run the ball. And J.K. Dobbins is still going to be that guy.
Yeah, I do think he's startable for right now, for sure. Kind of ride it until the wheels fall off kind of thing. But I do want to caution people to overreacting because, look, J.K. Dobbins is a guy that, coming out of college, he had this high pedigree. We wanted to see him be this workhorse back. We believed he could be one of the best backs in the league. And I just don't believe that is still in the range of outcomes, despite a great week
absolutely
one.
Absolutely
not. A lot of these points were ripped from a 61-yard run he had. And Gus Edwards still had more carries than he did this week. So I don't... Granted, they may move more toward Dobbins, knowing how much more explosive and better he is. Maybe the touch split will be more, 15-9 kind of deal. So I think you're definitely starting him as we go over these next few weeks, but just maybe a sell high candidate, depending what people might want to give you.
I don't hate that take.
Yeah,
and also with, unfortunately, how volatile his injury history has been.
Right.
And, he's never going to be that J.K. Dobbins again, I don't think. One, because he's not in a good enough offense. And two, because of the injury. But he doesn't have to be. At that point, if you're getting a productive player out of this Chargers offense, that's good. Great. Take it.
Yeah, I mean, this line is good. They want to run the ball, and we've been wondering who was going to be the guy here. And from a touch split perspective, we still don't know. But from a eye test perspective, it's J.K. Dobbins. So you're rolling him out there. I would still entertain the idea of possibly selling him high, though. The Broncos' backfield just fucking sucks.
Ew.
So Jaleel... Still notable, though, that Jaleel McLaughlin out-carried Javonte Williams, which we did not expect. So Jaleel McLaughlin, 10 carries for 27 yards and 5 catches for 1 yard, which is hilarious. Outproduced Javonte, who only had 8 carries for 23 yards and then 1 catch for 0 yards. So, look, both were bad. I think the takeaway here is Jaleel's probably the guy you want to own here for 2 reasons. 1, he had more carries, and 2, he had 5 catches. Now, they were for 1 yard, but, that's 5 points in a PPR league, and we already expected Jaleel to maybe be the more passing down guy. But if he's also getting more carries, this backfield is going to continue to evolve probably. Sean Payton was already not happy with how this looked week 1. He said, it's hard to ask for much from your quarterback when your run game sucks, essentially is what he said. So I'm not saying that what we saw week 1 is what we're going to continue to see, but this is a major hit on the Javonte Williams is back narrative.
Especially since that kind of started coming back with such a vengeance towards the end.
Right.
And just for that to be we were right all along.
Yeah,
we're
nothing's changed.
But I'm not eagerly starting either of these guys. They did not look very good. Bo Nix looked kind of overmatched, I would say, was the way to describe it. He didn't look bad. He just looked like the stage was a little too big for him. Lights were a little too bright. Not to say that he won't get used to it. It was the guy's first game in the pros. And, we're not talking about him the way we were talking about Caleb Poopy Pants, died on the field Williams, and Jaden Daniels. He never had that pedigree.
Yeah. Yeah, I made a joke in a video that I'm actively editing, but I said if Bo Nix had to throw an accurate ball downfield or draw 25, he'd have enough cards to open up his own casino. It was really bad.
I could smell casino.
I could smell the fear through my TV every time Bo Nix tried to throw the ball. So yeah, this Broncos offense, not something you really want any sort of investment in right now, but Jaleel looking like the better asset, at least, than Javonte Williams. The Cowboys' backfield, Zeke finished with 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown and 2 catches for 9 yards, although it was a fairly even split with Rico Dowdle, 8 carries for 26 yards and then 1 catch for 6 yards. So Zeke scored the touchdown, and that's really all we could say right now.
That's all we can say, and the other thing that I will say is most of Zeke's carries came at the beginning of the game. And then Dowdle started, I think at one point it was 8-2 in terms of carries, Zeke to Dowdle. And Dowdle kind of just started chipping away, probably as they got more up. Zeke is not going to be a guy that you're going to be able to confidently start, but I do think that goal line carry gives him the edge, and the Cowboys might have to run the ball more, without Jake Ferguson. Do they turn towards the run more? Am I starting either of these guys this week? No, but if you have to, I'm starting Zeke.
Yeah, I would agree. And then finally, we've got the Steelers. This one's hard to evaluate, but Najee Harris, 20 carries for 70 yards and 1 catch for 9 yards. He dominated the work in this backfield over the next name I'm going to say is Cordero Patterson, because he got the second most carries in the backfield, other than the quarterback. 4 carries for 13 yards, and then Jaylen Warren, 2 carries for 7 yards and 2 catches for 13 yards. So got to take this with a grain of salt because the massive split is likely related to Jaylen Warren still recovering from this hammy injury, them not wanting to fully unleash him. So we don't know exactly what this is going to look like going forward, especially, 20 carries for 70 yards. That is not efficient in the slightest.
No.
So I would expect to see Warren more involved, or at least more involved than Cordero Patterson going forward. But for now, we at least know that Arthur Smith is capable of giving a single running back, 20 carries, which you could have fooled me in Atlanta with Bijan Robinson.
And that's the thing. I think the fact that he was willing to do that is a good sign for Najee Harris owners like myself. Warren will be more involved, I think, and that's kind of what I said before the game, was that I like Najee this week specifically because they may try to ease Warren back in here. I had something else to say about Najee Harris, and I have forgotten. Oh, apparently he's the only player with 1,000 yards each of the last 3 seasons, which I guess kind of makes sense because he doesn't get hurt. Everybody else does. He's been in the league, 3 years now, and he has not missed. I don't know if he's missed a game ever.
He may not have. I think people at times may have wished he did, but he didn't. So look, the Steelers backfield is still one we have to watch because it's also going to be ever evolving. I think I'll be most curious to see when Warren gets more involved. Is it going to be at the expense of Najee, or is Cordero Patterson going to stay involved in this offense? Because I genuinely wouldn't be surprised with this doofus running their team.
I feel comfortable starting Najee this week. Jaylen Warren, I'd like to see it first.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, we will finish out the show, Pat, with our waiver targets for week 1, and there are plenty. Some guys we've already talked about. I've prioritized them in terms of how much I care about them right now, and you can feel free to agree or disagree. Number 1, I've got Jordan Mason for sure.
No doubt.
Just with what he did in game 1 against the Jets, and with McCaffrey's injury feeling very ominous right now, this is a guy, it's not often you can find a possible RB1 off waivers, and in our league, Pat, where everybody halfway relevant is always owned.
Is Jordan Mason not owned?
He's owned in our league. He's owned in our league. That's what I was saying. Like, we don't have the luxury of ever finding these types of guys because we got some sharps in our league, I'll say it. If he's available in yours.
They must listen to brand coverage.
They must. If he's available in yours, go get Jordan Mason. Send the house at him because the RB1 in a 49er offense is literally the ideal fantasy job.
I don't care if it's a dumpster on wheels. If in that Kyle Shanahan offense, they're going to run for at least 50 yards.
Yeah, you could put me out there, and I mean, as long as I've had my nutrients, I could probably put up 120 and a couple touchdowns. So Jordan Mason should be the priority. I think second in my priority list is just the Rams pass catchers. Not necessarily all of them, but I would take a stab here because
I would absolutely too.
Demarcus Robinson looked really good at the end of last year and was a startable fantasy asset. You know that these guys are going to see opportunities for the next month. You can't say that either about a lot of guys that you're looking at on waivers because Puka is the most significant injury other than McCaffrey that we've seen in week 1. So, somebody's got to help fill that void. And yes, Cooper Kupp is just going to be a psychopath all year, but
he's going to be a psychopath, but that's a high volume offense.
Yes, it is.
And they looked good. They looked good
they did.
Against Detroit. So while Kupp is going to be a big problem, there was plenty of room for someone to emerge. So
Demarcus Robinson was putting up those numbers last year with both those guys healthy. So
I think
more
he's
than possible.
Obviously the guy. But
he's the guy. I'm not going to underrate Tyler Johnson either, though, because Tyler Johnson is the one who is more directly filling in for Puka Nacua in terms of role and actually taking those snaps. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, with a guy like Tyler Johnson, is he just a jag? Is he not that good of a player? That's very well possible, so I wouldn't be shocked necessarily to see Jordan Whittington, Tutu Atwell take some of those snaps in the next couple weeks.
You just wanted to shoehorn him in, didn't you?
I love me some Jordan Whittington, but I will say I was annoyed I didn't see him play more on Monday or on Sunday, which is telling. Like, that's why I don't have him listed here right now. As much as I love him as a talent, Tyler Johnson was the guy that they put in, and Whittington was active.
Yeah.
Whittington had, I think, a touchdown actually called back on like an end around in that game, or at least it was a nice gain. So I would love to see him gain some ground, but as of right now, Tyler Johnson's that guy, so he's worth picking up. And yeah, if you need a tight end, Parkinson as well. The big one, Isaiah Likely. I think we both understand and agree there's some regression coming. Like, he's not going for 9 and
Absolutely.
111 and a touchdown every week, but he looks, you don't put that back in the bottle. Like, he didn't just score fantasy points. He looked like a damn good football player in that game.
We're not talking about a tight end who managed to find himself open in the end zone twice. No.
Right.
He was making plays. He was the most explosive player in that offense by a lot.
Yeah, so you're going
Aside
after
from
Isaiah
Lamar, of
Likely.
course, you know what I mean.
Yeah, look, feel free to prioritize Isaiah Likely, not over Jordan Mason, but over these Rams guys if your team specifically is in need of a tight end.
Especially Jake Ferguson, David Njoku, those are probably guys. I'm not benching any of the Kelseys, the Andrews, McBride, Kincaid, Engram.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting any of those guys.
No,
but if you have one of the guys that went down, or were one of the last guys to take a tight end, absolutely go for him.
Definitely. Tank Bigsby, who we just mentioned, I mean, if he's available in your league, you got to go after him just based on the work that he got in week 1, because he could potentially become like the early down back on this team. I mean, that sounds crazy, but we've heard the buzz, and the buzz materialized in week 1, and those are the kind of guys you have to take because it might be too late if you wait. Bucky Irving, Pat, I'm annoyed I don't have more Bucky Irving in my leagues after how much I've slandered Rachaad White over the years, because it is materializing. Rachaad White, notoriously inefficient. Bucky Irving, a little more efficient. Rachaad White's not going to go anywhere. Rachaad White is always going to have at least the pass catching role and still plenty of early down work, but it will not surprise me to see Bucky Irving eat more and more into that early down work if he continues to show that he is this good. I didn't expect Bucky Irving to hit the ground running like this. I figured if he was going to eat into Rachaad White's role, it would be a lot more gradual than week 1, where, let me pull up his numbers, his stat line.
He's a big boy. I don't know why I thought a man named Bucky wouldn't be a big boy.
I mean, it sounds like
a big boy.
It sounds like he's a chipmunk. So Bucky Irving had 9 carries for 62 yards with a long run of 31. Rachaad White, meanwhile, 15 carries for 31. So Bucky 9 for 62. Rachaad 15 for 31. And Pat,
Gus Edwards looking ass.
You want to know the last time I remember seeing a stat line like this? And this is going to be a massive overreaction. Cam Akers last year, week 1. 22 carries for 20 yards or whatever it was, and then it was the Kyron Williams show from that point forward. I don't think Bucky Irving is going to straight up yoink Rashaad's job, but
I don't either.
It wouldn't surprise me to see this be a 50-50 split in terms of at least the carries.
He's more of a perspective ad compared to some of these other guys where you might be able to plug them in this week.
Yeah. So I'm big on Bucky Irving. Justice Hill, I think, is a viable ad, but I also don't think it's necessarily going to be a consistent thing week to week. The Harbaugh did come out and say that they didn't sign Derrick Henry to get the ball 30 times, so Justice Hill will remain involved. I just feel like it's not going to be it's not a high upside role in my opinion. But
it's not a high upside role, but I think it's a great floor role. Derrick Henry was hardly out there at all on third down. And again, is Lamar going to be running for his life every week with that offensive line? Maybe, but actually, to a surprising degree, he did dump the ball off to Justice Hill a lot. That's if Justice Hill's available in a league I'm in, I'm going to pick him up just because I think that's a pretty safe guy on a week-to-week basis. Not, ceiling is limited, but
I just want to consider game script as well there because, they were in a tight game playing from behind a bit with the Chiefs. The Ravens are a really, really good offense. Now, they're going to be leading in a lot of games where they're not going to have to throw these little checkdowns to Justice Hill as often. The one thing I will say, though, is the early season schedule might be more conducive to Justice Hill than we realize because they've got your Raiders this week, Pat, where Derrick Henry might get 30 carries in that game.
Oh, they're going down.
After that, Cowboys,
money
Bills,
line on that one.
Cowboys, Bills, Bengals, the 3 weeks after that. And the Bengals should hopefully have their shit together by week 5. So those are more games where they could be competitive, and Justice Hill is catching some more of those dumpy dumpers.
A word.
run through these guys really quick. Jalen Wright, we talked about, important speculative ad because the Dolphins running backs are already hurt. You got to pick him up. Jeff Wilson's the guy, I think you're right, Pat, that you would prefer if you need a plug and play for this week. But Jalen Wright is still the upside play. It's really just a matter of what your team needs. If you were looking for a guy to start for you this week, it's probably Jeff Wilson. But if you're looking for, just trying to take advantage of the fact that the Dolphins' best backs are hurt and could stay that way, we don't know, go get Jalen Wright.
Jalen Wright's a hell of a talent, yeah.
He's very, very good, and McDaniel will know how to use him, and he's just much faster than Jeff Wilson. Brandon Cooks, we talked about before. He's a good ad. Pat, I see you got Alan Lazard here. I mean, look, he scored 2 touchdowns in that game.
And Aaron Rodgers fucking loves the guy. I think at the very least you need to roster him. Don't start him this week because, Garrett Wilson looked fantastic, but he's at least got to be on the radar.
I think that's fair. I'm not prioritizing him over any of these other guys we mentioned so far, but it's still, worth checking him out. The problem is that when Mike Williams gets involved more in this offense and gets fully healthy, probably going to relegate Lazard to backup duty. And now I just want to touch on these really quick. Some names that you will see in other waiver articles likely that I don't particularly care for. Alexander Mattison, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce definitely the most strongly against. People are going to look at the fantasy points. It's the most classic week 1. He had a lot of yards and touchdowns thing like I've ever seen.
Low target share.
Don't pick up a guy with 3 targets. Don't do it. That bomb Anthony Richardson threw, yes, he's capable of doing that, and it's going to happen at other times this year, but that's not a startable asset.
Or don't use a waiver spot. He's the kind of guy that you pick up after waivers clear, and if he's still available, take the shot on him, but I'm not burning any capital whatsoever. And obviously I'm going to have to talk about Alexander Mattison, that I kind of like him, but so weird that he out-snapped and out-targeted White, but White, greatly out-touched him. Anytime Zamir White was on the field, it felt like he was getting the ball. So I think the potential's there for him to be an RB1. The question is just, does that mean a fucking thing in this offense?
No. If this Raiders offense, if this Raiders backfield is going to be split, the team sucks. I'd rather. I think there's a world where I might rather have Madison because of the pass catching role, but that's just not a player.
Especially if they're losing.
Yeah, it's still just not a player I'm excited to pick up, and I would not be surprised in the least to see Dylan Laube start to absorb some of those pass catching roles at some point this year. And then Wan'Dale Robinson, look. If you're in full PPR, we can talk about it because he had 12 targets this week. And Daniel Jones, I'm not sure if he's physically capable of throwing the ball downfield accurately, but Wan'Dale Robinson does this shit where he has a game that pops up even with a high volume of targets. Yeah, he's a giant and he's gross.
He was a big talent coming out of college, but again, similar to Pierce. If waivers clear and he's available, go for it.
Yeah, it's just secondary option in a Giants offense.
Horrendous offense.
Fucking ew. I'm already barely excited about starting Malik Neighbors, let alone tiny boy Wan'Dale Robinson. Yeah. But, folks, we've gone a little over our 90-minute allotted time, but can you blame us? It's week 1. Thank you guys for joining us. We will be back here to react to week 2, and hopefully you get some of these fun guys on waivers, and we will talk to you guys then. But for this episode of Brand Coverage, that'll do it. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next week.
Zamir out-touched Alexander. Bye-bye.
And as always, for those of you who are still here, we will answer some questions live in the chat for the next 5 minutes or so. Got a bunch of you guys in here. Thank you.
Should I trade Tank Dell for MVH? Yes, I would.
Oh, God, yeah.
I would.
Yeah. I am a Tank Dell owner. Pat, we can make that happen right now. You want to make it happen?
No. I do like Tank Dell, but I think Marvin Harrison is still could be a top dog in an offense that's capable. We just saw them be very capable.
Yeah, Tank Dell did sort of exactly what I thought he would do, or thought he could do, which was he saw a bunch of those downfield targets. He even saw a couple of carries, but this week it didn't materialize and only turned into 40 yards, while Stephon Diggs scored 2 short yardage touchdowns, and that's the kind of role that he's going to have this year. So I have to accept that as much as I don't like it. Let's see what else we've got in the chat here. Should I trade Dell for MVH? Yeah, 100%. Do you bench Marvin Harrison Jr. until he shows up? Start Jamison Williams over him? No,
I can't, because Williams is still, a streaky kind of player as well.
Yeah, no, I would not. Marvin Harrison's I understand what you're saying because you saw it from one guy and you didn't see it from the other guy. that's a case where it's like Marvin Harrison Jr. is such a higher priority in the Cardinals offense versus Jamison Williams in the Lions.
They ran the ball a lot too, Detroit.
Yeah.
Just like they did in Arizona. Yeah.
The Lions just have an embarrassment of riches. And like we talked about before, like there's going to be weeks where that stat line is flipped and nobody's going to be surprised, where Amon-Ra has, 150 yards and a touchdown while Jamison Williams has 13, because also Sam Laporta is going to have more than 40 yards most weeks. So no, I'm not starting Jamison Williams over Marvin Harrison Jr., at least not yet. Should I trade Worthy for Marvin Harrison Jr.? Brother, if you're in a league that's that reactive, yes.
We didn't talk much about Xavier Worthy, but like, I'm tending to think it's on the flukier side of things. Crazy end around
for sure.
And a heinously blown coverage on those two touchdowns.
And with Hollywood Brown waiting in the wings, possibly playing as soon as this week.
He still will be involved, but I think those targets and touches can go down, and obviously the scoring volume on these touches is not going to be the way it was too.
Yeah. Shark Attack says drop Mostert for Pollard or Dobbins. I mean, shallow league with that being the case, but yeah, I mean, I'd drop Mostert for.
I prefer
probably
both of those
Pollard,
guys.
but I'd probably do it for both. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Pollard more so, but yeah.
And that's not a jumping off the ship on Mostert completely
how many teams
sentiment,
is that?
But
yeah.
that if those guys are available in your league, that's got to be an 8 or even 6 team league, I would think. Let's see here. Should I trade Dell for Olave?
I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it.
You don't think so? I mean, let's think back. That we're only 1 week removed from fantasy drafts where Olave went 2 to 3 rounds before Dell. Granted, I know draft
not
capital
in my drafts.
I
on
guess.
my board. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I understand. I get it.
Olave, you're looking at full-time player versus less full-time player, but Tank Dell may just be better and have a better quarterback. That's tough. I would say I'm not eager to do that, but I would maybe think about it. Let's see. Aster says, I'm Aussie, just getting into NFL. I want to support a team that will play well and be fun to watch, but probably won't win the Super Bowl, so I don't lose interest.
The Raiders.
No. If I'm not recommending the Patriots, you're not recommending the Raiders to our poor friend here. Team that will play well and be fun to watch, but won't win the Super Bowl, so you won't lose interest. Arizona Cardinals. They're gonna be good, but they're not gonna win much. They might not even make the playoffs, but they are gonna be fun to watch for sure.
I guess I don't want to knock the Texans down like that. They're going to win a Super Bowl very soon.
The Texans are still like AFC, not favorites, but like top 3 or 4 favorites in the AFC, especially after the Bengals look so bad.
Cardinals is a good one.
Pick up Gus Edwards or Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving, to me.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what kind of position you're in. Or do you need a guy to start this week, like a guy that might help you in the meantime? But if you're looking for a long-term stash, yes, the answer is Bucky Irving.
Yeah, I guess there's a world where, like, Dobbins gets hurt again and Gus kind of does the Ravens thing again where he's the primary back because they have no better options.
He won't do the Ravens thing, but obviously the touchdown opportunity will be there for him if they ever get to the fucking goal line.
We also did have a couple donations I wanted to touch on. We had 99 cents from Valerie a little bit ago during the show, and then Bailey tossed us $2 and said, Brian Thomas Jr. already better than Ridley. Agree.
Sure.
Probably true. Let's see. Good trade compensation for London. If you have Drake London, I probably wouldn't be trying to trade him yet.
I'm not.
It's his value's too low. Like, you need to wait. You need to hope and wait for it to come up a little. Because if you trade him right now,
you're not gonna get anything.
Like, Pat, you have Drake London. I'm not offering you anything better than, like, I don't know, maybe Zach Moss? Like, maybe. And even then, I'm like, I don't know. Like, honestly, I'll think about it.
You got the team that you got the man with 3 running backs on his roster at the moment. So, but
I know.
Yeah, I'm not looking to, I don't love the whole sell low kind of thing anyway, especially
it's almost never like, a good idea.
I got some inquiries about like Marvin Harrison Jr. and I'm like, I am not selling low on this kid. I'm like, I am absolutely not doing it. London, to a lesser degree, a lot lesser degree with London, but I'm still not ready to give up unless you kind of get surprised with like, well, my question to you was what kind of player would it take? Like, if I came to you and said, I want Drake London, I'll give you this guy. What would I have to say for you to say yes?
God, if we flip, here's the thing. I own Zach Moss because I like him, so I might take the deal of London for Zach Moss if it were flipped. But looking at like trying to think of just other players I would accept, I mean, call it a week 1 overreaction, but like I would trade London for Jameson Williams.
Wow. Okay.
And like that's
like
a case
Tony
of
Pollard.
If I needed a running back, yeah.
Again, that also depends on what you need. Yeah, but in wide receiver, Jameson, wow. I don't think I'm ready to quite give up on him that much yet.
It's just, I mean, I never liked Drake London, so I'm the wrong guy to ask. So, like, I guess
Brandon hates the Brits. He hates old people, and he hates the Brits.
I hate every Falcons pass catcher. They've all done me wrong. All right, we'll do a couple more here. Start McConkey or Jameson Williams.
I'm gonna go with the upside there. Yeah, but McConkey is a guy that,
though, to me.
Yeah, McConkey seemed to be Herbert's favorite guy there. A bit of a safer play, but I think that ceiling is good enough to chase.
Lions have the Bucks, Chargers have the Panthers. So I mean, I get it. But yeah, I think Jameson Williams
gonna run for 200 yards.
Jameson Williams at this point has the better, more high value usage because Pat, this is something we didn't talk about on the show, and maybe we should have, but motherfucking Quentin Johnston had like the fourth highest first read target percentage of anyone in week 1. If you sort by first read target percentage, it's like Tyreek Hill, Rashee Rice, Quentin Johnston, and then like AJ Brown. Like,
yeah, what's the
it's
problem?
Like it's the clown with the soldiers meme. It's like, what are you doing here?
What the hell a polar bear doing in Arlington, Texas?
It's something that like that will probably correct itself, but that we can't ignore right now. So, Ladd McConkey, if Ladd McConkey had that level of first read targets, I'd say, okay, he also scored the touchdown this week, so maybe. But for now, yeah, I'm going Jameson Williams. Bailey with another $1.99 said, the Colts are 0-10-1 in week 1 since 2013. Fucking yikes. Holy shit. And then we'll do one more here. I like this. Rashee Rice or Neighbors, Pat? I think that's Rice, but
I think it's Rice by a lot, honestly. I wouldn't think twice about it.
I don't want that to be the truth, but it is. And
he looked very well ingrained in that offense.
I mentioned last week about like possible draft regrets, and it was that I just didn't reach harder on Rice. And look, I'm very much not jumping off the ship on Neighbors either, as much as my fears were confirmed that watching Daniel Jones play football is a painful experience. But Malik Neighbors still led all rookie wide receivers in terms of yardage in week 1, and is just going to get a massive target share on that team. So I think he'll be fine. But yeah, Rashee Rice, I mean, that boy good, and he's going to get a lot of targets in that offense, so I would go for him for sure. Folks, thank you for joining us for brand coverage. We will be right back here next week, 7:30 Eastern time, reacting to week 2. So hope to see you there. Great viewership this week, so thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate you. And we'll see you guys next time. Adios.
Night.